The Battle of Stalingrad, a tale of survival and bravery. In the summer of 1942, the city of Stalingrad stood as a symbol of Soviet resistance against the relentless advance of Nazi Germany. The city, named after Soviet leader Joseph Stalin, was a key industrial hub and a strategic target for Adolf Hitler. The battle that ensued would become one of the bloodiest and most brutal confrontations in human history. As the German Sixth Army, led by General Friedrich Paulus, approached Stalingrad, the Soviet defenders prepared for a desperate fight. Among them was a young soldier named Alexei Petrov, a former factory worker who had volunteered to defend his homeland. Alexei was assigned to the 62nd Army under the command of General Vasily Chuikov, a man known for his tenacity and unyielding spirit. The battle began with a massive aerial bombardment by the Luftwaffe, reducing much of the city to rubble. Despite the devastation, the Soviet defenders, including Alexei, dug in and prepared for a fierce urban warfare. The Germans, confident in their superiority, launched a series of assaults, but the Soviets fought back with ferocity, turning every street and building into a fortress. As the weeks turned into months, the fighting grew more intense. The harsh winter set in, and both sides faced extreme conditions. Food and supplies were scarce, and the soldiers had to endure freezing temperatures and constant bombardment. Alexei and his comrades found themselves in a bitter struggle for survival, often fighting hand-to-hand in the ruins of the city. One night, during a particularly brutal assault, Alexei's unit was cut off from the rest of the army. Trapped in a partially destroyed building, they were surrounded by German forces. With no way to retreat, they decided to make a stand. Alexei, armed with a rifle and a few grenades, took up a position by a window, determined to hold off the enemy. As dawn broke, the Germans launched a final assault. Alexei and his comrades fought with everything they had, repelling wave after wave of attackers. Despite being outnumbered and outgunned, they managed to hold their ground. Alexei's bravery and determination inspired his fellow soldiers, and they fought with renewed vigor. Just when it seemed that all hope was lost, reinforcements arrived. The Soviet counteroffensive, Operation Uranus, had begun. The German forces were encircled, and the tide of the battle began to turn. Alexei and his comrades were relieved, but the cost had been high. The city was in ruins, and countless lives had been lost. The Battle of Stalingrad ended in February 1943 with the surrender of the German Sixth Army. It was a turning point in the war, marking the beginning of the Soviet Union's advance towards Berlin. Alexei Petrov survived the battle, his courage and resilience a testament to the indomitable spirit of the Soviet people. Part 2. The Aftermath and the Road to Berlin. After the grueling battle, Alexei and his comrades were given a brief respite to recover and regroup. The Soviet victory at Stalingrad had not only broken the back of the German offensive, but also boosted the morale of the entire Soviet Union. However, the war was far from over, and the Red Army had to push westward to liberate occupied territories and ultimately reach Berlin. Alexei was now a seasoned soldier, having faced the horrors of war head-on. He was promoted to sergeant and given command of a small squad. His leadership skills, honed in the crucible of Stalingrad, would be put to the test as the Red Army launched a series of offensives to reclaim their homeland. In the spring of 1944, Alexei's unit was part of the 1st Ukrainian Front, tasked with liberating the city of Kiev. The battle for Kiev was fierce, with the Germans determined to hold their ground. Alexei led his squad through the dense forests and treacherous terrain, using guerrilla tactics to outmaneuver the enemy. His bravery and tactical acumen earned him the respect of his men and the admiration of his superiors. As the Red Army continued its advance, Alexei's unit participated in the liberation of several key cities, including Minsk and Warsaw. Each battle brought new challenges and losses, but Alexei remained steadfast, driven by the memory of his fallen comrades and the hope of a brighter future. In January 1945, the Red Army launched the Vistula-Oder offensive, a massive operation aimed at breaking through the German defenses and reaching the Oder River, the last major obstacle before Berlin. Alexei's unit was at the forefront of the assault, facing fierce resistance from the entrenched German forces. The fighting was brutal, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. During the offensive, Alexei's squad was tasked with capturing a strategic bridge over the Oder River. The bridge was heavily defended, and the Germans had rigged it with explosives, ready to destroy it if the Soviets got too close. Alexei devised a daring plan to infiltrate the enemy lines under the cover of darkness and disable the explosives. Under the cover of night, Alexei and his men crawled through the mud and snow, avoiding enemy patrols and mines. They reached the bridge and, with nerves of steel, began to disarm the explosives. Just as they were about to finish, they were discovered by a German patrol. A fierce firefight ensued, but Alexei and his men managed to hold their ground and complete their mission. The bridge was secured, and the Red Army was able to cross the Oder River, bringing them one step closer to Berlin. In April 1945, the final assault on Berlin began. Alexei's unit was among the first to enter the city, facing desperate resistance from the remaining German forces. The battle for Berlin was chaotic and brutal, with street-to-street and house-to-house fighting. Alexei led his men with unwavering determination, knowing that the end of the war was within reach. On May 2, 1945, the Soviet flag was raised over the Reichstag, signaling the fall of Berlin and the end of the war in Europe. Alexei Petrov, who had fought from the ruins of Stalingrad to the heart of Berlin, stood among the victorious soldiers. The war had taken a heavy toll, but Alexei's courage and resilience had helped secure a future free from tyranny. As he looked out over the devastated city, Alexei thought of his comrades who had fallen along the way. Their sacrifice had not been in vain. The world had been forever changed by the events of the war, and Alexei knew that it was now up to the survivors to rebuild and ensure that such a conflict would never happen again.